Home Gym is. We've been talking all this month about building strength, and you are a physical trainer at the gym and stuff, but the gym is more than just like the building, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's really about the people that are there.
Yes, behind every good gym is an even better community of people. I'm very lucky to have that, not only in the current gym that I'm at, but I've worked at several different gyms throughout the last few years, and I tell you, one thing that makes the difference with your community is the people that make it up. These are people that oftentimes come into the community and don't know each other. And within weeks, within months, over time, these are people that become your best friends. They're in your weddings, they're coming to your family events, and just the people that you become closest with, share the most intimate details with. And so again, I'm very lucky to have an amazing community around me that are some of my biggest motivators when it comes to my own training, is knowing that I've got people supporting me, watching me, encouraging me on. There's nothing more you could ask for.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up the series today, we're talking about building our mental strength, and the same principle applies, that we need the right voices in our life in order to make that happen.
Well, good morning again. Welcome to week 4 of our series, Mentally Strong. Welcome to those joining us online as well. And all this month, we've been talking about our mental health, because I've just have seen this throughout, whether it's news reports about mental health crisis or just talking with people. There's just these feelings of feeling anxiety and stress, or overthinking and overwhelmed with life, and it's like just hard to handle all the things life throws at you, or people who say they can't sleep or their mind is just always racing. And so we've been talking about how we can build mental strength, and we've talked about stuff like anxiety and how to deal with that or things like that in the past, but this series we've been in a little bit different approach of how can we be more proactive, because there's lots of things we can do to maybe maintain our mental health, like drinking enough water and getting exercise and enough sleep and stuff like that. But what we're talking about is how can we actually build mental strength so that when the challenges come, because they're going to come, when life gets busy or crazy, that we won't be overwhelmed. Like, how do we build mental strength so we aren't overwhelmed when the challenges of life come our way? So we've been talking about that all this month. As always, I want to encourage you to check out the YouVersion Bible app too. If you haven't done this yet, we have a Bible reading plan to go along with this series. And it's a 7-day Bible reading plan. So if you haven't done it yet, you can still do it this week and jump in on that. Really encourage you to do that. There's a way to take this a little further. And the Bible reading plan is based on one of the books we've been promoting. We have this one book at the end is Winning the War in Your Mind. There's a whole Bible reading plan that goes along with that book. So you might want to check that out, or maybe even order the book online. We have a couple of the soundtrack books still available at the cafe. If you buy one today, there's 2 left. If you buy them, we'll give you donuts for free, because there's probably going to be some left over anyways. So you can get some free donuts. I don't know. But there's 2 books left if you want to grab that. The author of that soundtrack book is John Acuff. We've been looking at some of his quotes as he talks about our thinking and our minds. And one of the things that he says is that we get to choose our thoughts. And that's something I don't think that we actually think about. Like, we think that maybe thoughts are something we have, but he says there's something we can hone. We can actually choose our thoughts. And he talks about how the Bible begs us to take our thinking seriously and to care about what you think. There's all kinds of verses throughout the scriptures about our minds and our thinking and how that affects our lives. One of them we've been looking at all this month is Romans 12:2. It talks about how to renew our mind and how that transforms our life. It says, don't conform anymore to the pattern of this world. The pattern of this world right now is a pattern of anxiety and stress and overwhelmed. It says, don't conform to that. Instead, be transformed. How? By the renewing of our minds. And so the Bible has a lot to say about our minds. We've been looking at that all this month. And today we're talking about another aspect of that. And we're talking about who are the voices in your life and how are they impacting your mental health? Who are the voices in your life? How are they impacting your mental health? Do you have some friends in your life or some people in your life, coworkers or someone like that, and they're really just adding to the anxiety of your life? I had a conversation recently with someone who works here. I'm not going to name names, but I work with them here. And they said, if we're going to be going to this thing, I don't want so-and-so to drive because I don't want to ride with them. Why? Because she was saying that it adds to the anxiety in her life. She wasn't talking about me. I'm a good driver. Anyways, but maybe you know someone like that. They're a crazy driver or whatever. You're like, I don't want to ride with them. That brings anxiety into my life. Or maybe you have someone that you work with or someone, maybe an extended family person, and and they're someone who just always brings all the drama in, right? Do you have someone like that in your life? There's just like, whenever you talk to them, it's always like everything is the biggest deal, and they're always offended, they're always about drama, and you like walk away from the conversation and you just feel overwhelmed, even though you didn't experience any of those things, so they just dump it all on you. Or maybe you just have someone in your life that's like negative, and they're always just like looking for the worst case scenario, or just they're always just critical or things like that. Do you have people like that you know? I'm sure you probably have someone in mind right now, someone who is adding to the anxiety of your life. Well, it might not be actually even just a person, but it might be even something that is a voice that speaks into your life. Do you have maybe some shows you watch that you stream on TV or on YouTube or whatever, or maybe some music you listen to, or podcasts? There's voices like that speak into your life and actually add more anxiety in your life? Like, are you like, I can't sleep at night, and you're like, well, I wonder why, and you just listen to this murder podcast like right before bed, and now you can't sleep? It's like those things can actually add, there are voices that can add anxiety into your life. Do you have people in your life that are adding to the anxiety? And on the other hand, do you have anyone in your life that's actually helping to build your mental strength? Now, we can probably think pretty quickly about someone who adds anxiety to our life, but someone who actually helps build us up, those are usually few and far between. But those are the things we really need if we want to build our mental strength. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, there's a verse that says this: though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves, but a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. Now, this is kind of battle terms here. It talks about if you're in a fight by yourself, it's kind of like, well, good luck. It's kind of what it said, because if you're just going it alone, you're going to be overpowered, it says. And if you have a partner with you, 2 people can kind of stand back to back and defend themselves, but they can't make any advancements. But a cord of 3 strands, it says, isn't easily broken. See, if 3 people are fighting together, they can almost form this circle and take on whatever is coming at them from whatever angle. And the picture we see here is kind of moves away from the military battle type thing to this idea of like a cord, a rope. If you can picture like a rope, the rope is made of multiple cords that are tightly wrapped together, and that gives it its strength. When it comes to our mental strength, the same thing applies. If you're going at it alone, you're going to be easily overwhelmed. You're going to be easily stressed out. If you're just trying to do it all by yourself, you're going to be overpowered easily. Like 2 people is better, but when we have a circle of friends, a cord of 3 strands where we can go at it together, that's where we really find strength in our life. We need a circle of friends to build strength. Now, when we're talking about like a circle of friends, we think of that cord of 3 strands. Those strands have to be wrapped together. They have to be together in it. And this is what we're talking about with a real circle of friends. Because if we think of our friends, we might have some people that aren't great friends. We might have some people that maybe are good friends. But a lot of our friends really have maybe no influence. If we're thinking about like the voices that are influencing our life, a lot of times our friends don't have any influence. They're just people we know, we like to hang out with. Like we go and have a good time, but they're not really adding to the anxiety, and a lot of times they're not really building us up. They're just kind of friends. We got to have the true friends, the circle of friends who are intertwined, moving in the same direction, people who we can do life with, where our lives are synced up like cords of strands together so that we can build each other up and build these strands together. I saw someone post something about this on social media a couple of weeks ago. I actually took a mental note of it because I knew we were talking about this coming up. And I don't remember who posted it or who was the person that said it, but they were talking about this idea of the circle of friends, and they said, be willing to have a circle of friends who are more apt to put your name in their prayers than in their social media posts. I thought that was really interesting. Have friends who are more willing to put your name in their prayers than their posts. And he talked about the best way to level up your life is to have a circle of friends that are building you up. Now, I know that's so true. Our friends really figure into our focus in our life. And if we have the right friends around us, it's like that cord of three strands where we can face life and its challenges because we have the encouragement, we have the people behind us to build us up. But the problem is, especially in this day and age, is that can be a struggle. It's hard to find those type of people, and even in the age we're in, it's an age of isolation. I've talked about, I've seen a lot of these mental health reports talking about this mental health crisis. I also saw a report talking about how that the current state of these generations that we're in right now are the most isolated time in history. And I'm not surprised that this time of isolation that we're in and how that applies to our mental health crisis as well. Like those things definitely play hand in hand because God designed us to be in relationship. He calls us to encourage each other and to build each other up. He designed us that way, and we need those type of relationships in our life. So again, we think about who are the friends and the influences in your life? And maybe you're like, well, I've been burned too many times by those bad friends. I'm just going to go it alone. The problem is that we can't trust our own thoughts, and we're not designed to go it alone. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, how our past experiences, the negative, can change kind of the soundtrack, the playlist in our mind, or what people have said about us in the past. We can play that over and over in our mind, and it affects us, and it builds an anxiety. We can't trust our own thoughts. And as we looked at that other verse, if we're just going alone, we're easily overpowered. We need people to speak into our life. We need people who can be that circle of friends to bring us this mental strength. There's an example of how this might play out that I saw in Ephesians chapter 4. Let's look at this with me. Ephesians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus, and what we'll see here is he is trying to be this kind of influence to build them up because their thinking was not in the right place. Here's what it says, Ephesians 4, verse 17. It says this, "So I tell you, and I insist on it in the Lord, so that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do in the futility of their thinking." He's saying, don't live like these other people because their thinking is messed up. They are darkened in their understanding, and they separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. And having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. He says their thinking is in the wrong spot. They're going at it alone, and they're living all for themselves. Greed is what I can get. They're indulging in whatever makes them feel good. It's they're just doing whatever makes them happy. It's all about this self-focused living. And he says that type of thinking, that's not going to build this mental strength. It's not going to build up our life. He says that is futile thinking. It continues though, it says this. He says, that, however, is not the way of life that you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught that with regards to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitudes of your mind, and to put on a new self, created to be like God in the righteousness and holiness. He says here, Paul says, listen, I want to encourage you. I want to build you up. I want to be in this circle of friends with you. And what I've noticed is that your thinking is getting a little off track. And he says, I want you to have a new attitude of your mind, a new way to think, to put off your old self and to live in this new way. So this is a great example of, as we can't always trust our own thoughts, Paul here is speaking to these people listen, remember what we talked about? Here, I want to remind you, I want to help keep everyone on track. It's this idea of, let's be in this life together. We need friends that can speak into our life like that. The Bible talks about this over and over again, this idea of encouraging each other and building each other up. Some other examples, 1 Thessalonians 5, it says this, "Therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing." Hebrews chapter 10, it says, "Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards good deeds, and not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another." And so we see that again. It's encouraging each other, building each other up, spurring each other on. We see in Proverbs, we looked at a verse earlier in the series, it says, "Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a cheerful word, but a kind word can cheer it up." And we talked about speaking kindly to ourselves and our minds, but we see this example too of how we can have this anxiety in our life that can weigh us down. And when we have the right people around us that can actually cheer us up, build us up, encourage one another. There's another proverb that says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Like, we need these relationships to help us have a new mindset, to help us build this mental strength so we're not just going at it alone. We see this all throughout Scripture. So the question comes back to where we began. Who are the voices in your life? Who are the ones who are speaking into your life? And how is that affecting your mental health? Do you have people who are adding to the anxiety? Well, what do I do with that? And again, as we were talking about that earlier, you probably had someone pop in your mind. So what do I do with that person who is adding to the anxiety of my life? Well, I want to say this as a precursor. If it's your kids or your spouse, like, you're kind of stuck with them. So this doesn't apply to them. You just have to, that's a whole other series that we might need to talk about. But if you're thinking like a friend or a coworker or maybe even an extended family, it might mean we have to limit their influence in our life. It might mean that we need to not let them speak into our life as often. It might mean keeping them more at a distance. I heard someone say it this way. You should always be friendly, but you don't have to be friends. I think it's a good way to think about it. You know, this, as we are heading into this fall here, this is like campaign season. Maybe you have that one friend and everything they post is just like, it's harsh and it's whatever. There's this thing on Facebook or other social media posts where you can unfollow, where you can hit the snooze button on them, where you don't have to see their posts. And maybe there's some people in your life where you need to hit that snooze button a little bit and not let them play into the anxiety of your life. We need to limit those type of people. That means if you are walking down the hall and you see that person coming at you at work, you're like, oh no, it might mean you need to try to limit the conversation and be like, hey, can we talk later? Or like, just set yourself up where you're not going to let them dump all their anxiety on you. Now, we want to be a good friend and encourage each other, but we know the people we're talking about, those people that really weigh us down. On the other hand, how do we find friends who can encourage and build us up? Because it's easy to find people who can dump all their anxiety on us, but how do we find the type of friends who build us up and who encourage us? That's much more of a challenge, isn't it? And the hard part of that is, if you want to have a friend that builds you up and encourages you, you have to be that kind of person. You have to be a person who builds other people up and encourages other people, because that attracts them. Think of it the other way. Anxiety, like we talked about that. If you're walking down the hall at work and you see that one person coming at you, you're like, oh no. Like, you're not attracted to all their anxiety they're going to dump on you. And so we want to be the opposite of that. And if we are someone who encourages, someone who builds other people up, you attract those same type of people. And the hard part of that is, though, that to find those type of people and to be that type of person, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like, hey, by next week, I'm going to have a best friend. I'm going to have a circle of friends. We're going to be the cord of three strands. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes years to build those type of friendships. But if we're willing to be that type of person, we're going to attract that type of person. Now, here at church, like, we try to foster relationships like that. But again, we can't just make that happen. But if you just come on Sundays, it's really hard to build those type of relationships. If you show up to something like the network projects, you're rubbing shoulders with people who are serving together, and that begins to form these relationships. Or if you volunteer on a team here, you're working together with people on the same mission, and you begin to build those connections. And we have groups, smaller groups, that begin to meet out of those teams. And so I've seen people who have these smaller groups that meet out of those teams, and they've been with each other through thick and thin, through hard times, and it's been that type of relationship, that circle of friends, that has brought strength to their life. But again, that didn't happen overnight. It took time. So don't go through life alone. Pay attention to the voices who are speaking into your life. If you have those friends who are adding to the anxiety, we might need to limit them. But if we want to have people in our life to build us up, to build our mental strength, to build our faith, to build up our lives, to encourage each other, you got to be that type of person, and it's going to take time. Over this whole month, we've been talking about mental strength, and let's do a little recap of where we've been. So we've been talking about, if we want to build mental strength, to be able to face the challenges of life and not be overwhelmed when those hard times or busy times come, we need to do some things. We need to find rest. What that meant was real rest isn't just vegging out. Real rest is a Sabbath. It's found with resting our mind. Our mind is a muscle, and we can't overwork it. And if we want to find real rest for our minds, what we talked about is a mind governed by God's Spirit finds real life and peace. So we have to Sabbath and make space for God. We talked about letting God shape our thoughts about ourselves, because if God is for us, who can be against us? That we are more than conquerors through him. And so we want to have that type of mindset. To not let our past mistakes or what other people have said about us to define us, but to let God define us and to live with that victor's mentality. Last week we talked about challenging ourselves, that when we face hard times, it's really easy mentally just to kind of check out or bail, revert back to our old ways, or just not follow through, just take the easy way out. But we said that doesn't build up our strength or our life. We build up strength by persevering. That shapes our character, that brings hope. We get to see God at work in and through our life, through those circumstances. Today we talked about how a circle of friends makes us stronger. It's strength in numbers. So this is where we've been. And so what I would like to do is, there was some papers on the stools when you came in. I'm sure some of you grabbed them, some of you didn't. I want to give you just a few minutes to kind of debrief this whole month, what we've been talking about. Maybe you haven't been here all month, that's fine. We just kind of went through some things. But there's some questions on those papers. If you didn't grab one, you can go grab one. I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to kind of debrief this, to take it to heart, to not just let these be words you hear, but to actually take some steps to build mental strength in your life. So here, I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and you can just begin to fill out those questions and to think through this for yourself. I want to encourage you to take that home, maybe continue to think through that and to continue to build this mental strength in your life. But we have one more thought from Jacob as we are kind of wrapping this up, so check this out.
There's a verse here from 1 Timothy 4:8. It says this: "For physical training is of some value, but godliness has a value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come." So you've been talking a lot about the value of physical training. That brings a lot of value to our life. But how have you maybe experienced the godliness, the spiritual training aspect in your life?
Yeah, like I was saying, I love that you brought that verse up to me. I love the verse. I love that you asked me that question. I approach it in a very similar way, in the sense that having a relationship with God, in a way, has a similar input to the way that we train. So when we think about trying to build muscle, to build strength, there's all these different things you have to do to ultimately get this result that you're looking for. You've got to pretty much show up every single day and work out. You've got to consistently add weight over time. You've got to put in very hard work and a lot of time and do so many things outside of that to get this great result. Oftentimes, you get to this end point of seeing a result and you're instantly met with this feeling of, what's next? I feel empty. I need something more. It's that next thing. Similar input when you're looking at having a relationship with God and having Him at the center of your life. We got to work hard for it. We've got to put in time to build a relationship with Him, to pray, to go to church, do all these things, and we're left with a very different outcome. Something that I have felt, something that people closest to me have felt, this feeling of fulfillment, this feeling of peace, of happiness, of joy. And I think that just goes to show that if you're willing to put in that work, you're going to get an outcome that you maybe didn't expect, but ultimately you're going to be left just knowing that you're good, you're at peace, and if He's at the center of your life, then you're good.
Great thoughts from Jacob there as we are thinking through building our life, our mental strength, our faith. He says it takes us a lot of input, but the output of investing in our relationship with God brings this fulfillment and this peace. And I hope, as we've been talking about mental strength all this month, that as you continue on through these days, that as you face those challenges, you won't be overwhelmed because you have grown in this relationship with God who has brought peace to your life, brought real rest, because you're shaping who you're becoming in the eyes of God, and you see yourself through how He sees you, that you have built friends who are walking in the same path with you, and they have built up your life together. And as you face those challenges, you've seen God work over and over again, and you can have confidence that He will be there again no matter what you face. That's what I hope you experience as we continue to talk about this mental strength. As we go forward, I encourage you again to fill out those forms, think through that for yourself, and continue to take those steps. Let's pray. God, we just thank you that you're not a distant God, that you're a God who is here, that you're a God who cares, that you know all we're going through, whether it's hard times in life or struggles, or whether it's just even the struggle that's in our mind. You know what we're going through, and you care about that. Your word tells us we can cast all our anxiety, all of our cares on you because you care for us, and we do that now, God. We take all this stress, this anxiety, we take our challenges, and we just ask you, God, to work in our lives, in our mind, to give us the peace that only you can give us the guidance, to bring people into our life that can build us up. We just ask you to work in our life, God. May we have mental strength because we have this relationship with you. We continue to open ourselves up to you. We pray in your name. Amen. One more thing is next week we're starting a brand new series, and it's called Increase the Impact, and we're going to be talking a lot about what's ahead in the coming next phase for our church, and so I hope you can join us next month. It's going to be an exciting time. We're also celebrating our birthday next week as a church, so that'll be fun. So I hope you're back here next Sunday. Until then, let's just stand with us right now. Let's worship God and turn our hearts towards Him, and just respond with a song.